I'm the president of the Madison Region Economic Partnership, and we are very proud to be among the founders of the Wisconsin Games Alliance. It was only a couple of years ago that we met with representatives of the University of Wisconsin to get a better handle on what the environment was like in gaming, and within a couple of months we had a meetup at Filament Games. We had some activity with respect to Forward Fest, and 2 years later we're launching our first M+DEV conference. And in between, I think we've seen that the games environment here and the ecosystem is spectacular. We as an economic development organization are involved in this space simply because we see it as another very key component of our ICT sector, our information communications technology. And we see it as an opportunity to bring more talent here, an opportunity to bring more business here, and ultimately make it a lot easier for folks like you to start businesses and grow them here. It's all about more jobs, more businesses, and a very strong financial environment and economy for the Madison region. How many folks here are from outside of Wisconsin? How many of you are from outside the country? All right. Anyone? Anyone here from another planet? I want to welcome you again and hope you have a great day. Those of you who are from out of the area, please leave a lot of money behind before you go home. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce one of the two key drivers behind this. You'll hear from Tim Garretson in a little while. He's been absolutely spectacular in terms of the leadership he's shown. But his co-chair in this whole effort is someone who is vital to the success we've had so far and will continue to be. She's an individual who works for Filament Games and has absolutely infectious energy. So please welcome Jennifer Javornik.
Thanks, Paul, and welcome everyone to M+DEV. I want to start out first by thanking all of you. We had a total marketing budget of $200, and that somehow was able to get everyone here. So it's only because you guys liked and shared and talked to each other and got each other here that this event was possible. So give yourselves a round of applause. Tim Gerritsen is an amazing human being. I don't know if you know that, and if you don't know him, you should meet him while you're here. Tim has had a very long career in the games industry, starting with early beginnings at Sega and one of the founders, and then came back to Human Head and recently founded Fantasy Flight Interactive. What I love about Tim is that he had this vision for years of putting on a Midwest regional professional game developers conference, and was tenacious about it. And even though he is not a man with a lot of time on his hand, he stepped up and took an awesome leadership role from everything from the logistics to the speaker recruitment to the exhibitors. He really was just such a driving force. Personally, I met Tim 3 years ago when I actually just joined the video game industry. And I have to say, from my personal experience with him, he was so generous with his time as a 20-plus year veteran, so patient in kind of explaining to me how the industry works, and was so welcoming. So when I think about the Midwest video game community, there's no one who better embodies it but Tim Garretson. So please put your hands together for the one, the only, Tim Garretson.
Follow up on that. Thank you, Jennifer. I want to give one more round of applause to Jennifer because she really helped make this happen. I don't want to take all this credit. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. I know you could be home binge watching Stranger Things Season 2 and playing Super Mario Odyssey, so I greatly appreciate it. Though if you do have a Switch, you could have brought it with you and you could have accomplished both. For me, the game industry started professionally in Wisconsin in 1990. When I went to Mecca Arena in Milwaukee at Gen Con. Now back then, Gen Con wasn't the juggernaut it is today, but it was still a pretty big thing. And for a nerd who grew up on Dungeons and Dragons, which is also a Wisconsin homegrown favorite, going to Gen Con was always a big thrill, especially when it was in Milwaukee. And in 1990, I ran into two guys who were standing in front of the Mecca handing out little 3.5-inch black floppy disks. And on it was written Black Crypt. And I said, hey guys, I'm a gamer, what do you got there? And they said, well, it's only for Amiga. And I'm like, hey, I'm an Amiga guy, what do you got? And it turned out that those two guys were Brian Raffel and Ben Goki, and they were two of the small crew that made up Raven. And Raven, you may have heard of, Raven Software. I don't know if any of you here from Raven represent. Thank you very much. But Raven is really the granddaddy of the professional industry here in Wisconsin. That's not to say that there weren't people making games in Wisconsin prior to that, but they were the first people to actually put together a business and make a go of it. And they're today our biggest employer in the state. And I'm super enthused to have the folks who were able to make it out from Raven, because the guys at Raven are always busy. But I want to give 1 minute of applause to those people who put Raven together and really made the industry possible here in Wisconsin. So really, M+DEV is something we put together because we feel there is a strong need for an industry presence here in Wisconsin, creating jobs, making great games. We already have people doing that, but we want to toot our own horn, get people excited, make them aware that there is an industry here, that it's strong and vibrant and growing. I want people to be able to grow up and stay in Wisconsin and make games here if they so choose. I had to go elsewhere to really start my career, and I always wanted to come back. Wisconsin was always home. I love living here. I love being here. I've left. I've come back more than once. But to me, this is always home. And so I'm super enthused. I'm humbled that all of you were able to make it out today and join us. But enough about me, enough about this. You guys are here to see Warren. And I just want to introduce Warren Spector. He is a legend in the industry, one of my own heroes in the industry, a narrative hero, a guy who put together Deus Ex and Ultima Underworld and Epic Mickey and so many great games, somebody who we all look up to. And so it is with great pleasure and great excitement that I introduce all of you to Mr. Warren Spector.
Now let's see if we can get this working now. Hold on one sec. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for having me here. A lot of people don't know I actually have a Wisconsin connection. I worked at TSR in Lake Geneva for 2 years and experienced the wonders of winter here. I also actually worked with the guys at Raven on a game called Shadowcaster, which not many people know. I didn't feel like I contributed enough to put my name on it, but now you know the big secret. I worked with the Raffel brothers on Shadowcaster. So anyway, with that having been said, let's get started. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself, so maybe I have a little bit of credibility here. I want to talk about what it means to be able to define success. But before I do that, I started out working a long time ago. I'm a 30-year game veteran. And I've worked at Steve Jackson Games and TSR and Origin and all these other places. I've worked on way more tabletop games than I care to remember, and 24 digital games, including some of those that Tim mentioned. I'm especially proud of a couple of Epic Mickey games that some of you may have liked and some of you may think I was a sellout to make. But in fact, there are 2 people here. I don't know where they are in the room, but there are 2 other people who worked on the game. There we go. I've had the chance to work on Choose Your Own Adventure books. I got to type the words, "It's clobbering time." And Stanley actually read those words. It was awesome. I got to write a novel and some DuckTales comic books. I've worked for huge companies and startups. put together a game development program at the University of Texas. The Dean Sam's Game Academy, one of whose graduates is over there. And now I'm a partner in an independent studio, so I've sort of come all the way around, called Other Side Entertainment. We're working on Underworld Ascendant, which is a spiritual successor to the old Underworld games, if any of you remember those. We're going to be published by 505 Games, which is cool. And my personal project is System Shock 3, which is obviously a sequel to System Shock and System Shock 2. It still amazes me that people care about stuff that happened in the 90s, but apparently they do. See, if we were the 80s, I'd understand it, because nostalgia for the 80s is everywhere, right? Anyway, and we're working with Starbreeze to bring you System Shock 3. Okay, so that's me. In 34 years, I've developed some pretty strong opinions about video games and about how to find personal and professional satisfaction in the video game medium. And so I'm going to share some of those opinions with you today. So this is the big topic I want to talk about. What does it take to succeed? All right? And how do you begin to define success? Seems so obvious, and yet it's not. Developers have defined success in a variety of ways. Some of them value revenue, profitability. Someone's funding your game. It's probably the top priority for them. And it's probably a top priority for you too if you want to, I don't know, eat, pay rent, that sort of thing. Development cost, your funding partners are going to care a lot about that too. If you come in on budget, a lot of people will say you were a successful project. You should probably care about this a lot. Sales, most people value big numbers. Big numbers are good numbers. And as a developer, anybody who says they want to reach the smallest possible audience is probably not going to succeed in life, let alone in business. So the more people see your work, the better. Schedule performance, when you ship, is important if you're working for a publisher, no doubt about that. And the discipline of sticking to a schedule, even though I have never once done it in my entire life, is probably important, because you don't want to work on your magnum opus forever. All right? There comes a time when no game is finished, but they're going to wrench it out of your hands anyway. You just got to ship the damn thing. And then credibility, that's kind of a weird one, but I've worked for Disney, which when we started there really was after credibility. They had no credibility in the AAA game space, had always been a licensor and wanted to develop some credibility there. I worked with Majesco, a very small, well, relatively small company that needed to develop some credibility. So that's often an important success criterion, credibility. Team morale, happy team. There's got to be something that rhymes with that, Anyway, but a team that's happy together sticks together, and that's important too. Retention is important. And if you're part of a smaller operation, a happy team might actually determine friendships and how they last. So morale is an important success criterion as well. Critical acclaim, frankly, lots of people care about Metacritic. I do not. Who cares? Some people, that didn't go over well in this crowd. Yeah. And some people define success as just creating a fun experience, fun. Anybody who wants to define that word for me, we can talk outside in the hall. I have no idea what it means. It's useless. We shouldn't use it. Okay. Whatever your success criteria might be, I think you need to identify them, communicate them, agree on them with all of your constituents before you begin working on a game. Okay? You need to know not just what you're going to do, but how you're going to know when or if you've hit your target. You need to have a definition of success. So that's it. Thanks for coming. Appreciate. Oh wait. Obviously, I don't think that's all of the success criteria. There are others which are more personal, kind of soft and squishy and touchy-feely, but they're at least as important, at least to me, as some of the more business-oriented and development-oriented success criteria I just mentioned. So I'm going to keep talking whether you like it or not. Lots of people make games because that's just what they do. They get an idea of what they think would be fun for players. They make it, get another fun idea, make it, and so on, and that's a career. By the time they reach the end of their career, and trust me, that day is coming for everyone in this room, maybe a while off, but it's coming. They can look back and they can say, I made a bunch of games. And for some people, that's satisfying and sufficient. That's enough of what counts as success. But some developers want more. And for the medium, I'd argue there must be more than just making random fun games. So the rest of this talk is about that more. Why it's important to have a philosophy, a why that provides a consistent foundation for your work, and then a couple of tips for finding your own personal more. So what I'm going to talk about here is, I promise I will actually talk about this at some point. You need some foundational principles. And so what I did was I asked a bunch of my friends, developer friends, to tell me what their foundational principles were, their whys, the questions they ask themselves before they start working on a game. And one person said, does this create an immersive, believable, novel world? That's a question that this person asks himself before he starts working. Does this game make the world a better place? Man, that's a big one. One of my developer friends asks himself that. Does this game connect people to one another in a positive human fashion? Does this meaningfully connect players in a way that could only be achieved in a fantasy or unreal environment? Another big one. Am I personally learning something about the craft of game design by making this game? Is this game about shooting people in the head? Because I don't want to make that game. And is this game like X but plus 10%? What this person said and went on to say was, that's not enough. Life is short, and there's so much left that's new and original to explore. Couldn't agree more. But rather than give you these just one-sentence, one-liner things, I want to talk about my why and my foundational principles and get at my success criteria. Not because they're the only ones. I've already been through a couple, so I'm not saying these are the only ones. I'm not saying they're the best ones. I'm saying they're the only ones I can talk about because they're mine. And if you've heard me speak in the past, some of this is going to sound familiar, all right? That's on purpose, and you'll understand why in a little while, okay? All right, so obviously I want to make money. But obviously, based on the fact that my games are kind of cult classics and not Call of Duty level hits, that's not the most important thing to me. Don't tell my publishers that. I like attention, so critical acclaim is nice. I want my teams to be proud of their work and happy working with me, which sometimes happens, sometimes not. But when push comes to shove, I have 5 foundational principles, 5 critical things that define success for me. Have we made a game that empowers players to tell their own stories through their play choices? That's really important to me. Have we made a game that teaches players something about themselves? I'm going to talk about more of these in detail in a minute. Have we made a game that has at least one thing no one in the world's ever seen or done before? Have we made a game that lets players walk in someone else's shoes for a while? And have we made a game that's about something more than just what's on the surface? Have we made players think? When I think about those success criteria, I think of them as a mission. And I hope by the time I'm done talking, you'll either agree with me or disagree so violently that you will be encouraged to come up with your own success criteria, your own foundational principles, and consider what your mission is. And then we can have a fun argument out in the hall after we talk about what fun means. Seriously, think about that. Fun is a meaningless word. Okay, so first, I said, have we empowered players? So this part of my personal mission began with Dungeons & Dragons. There you go, D&D, right here in Lake Geneva. The first day I played Dungeons & Dragons was life-changing for me. It was back in 1978, and my dungeon master was Bruce Sterling, who's kind of a cyberpunk guru guy. He was a great storyteller, but what made the experience great wasn't the story that Bruce told us. It was the story that me and my friends told with him. Okay, we told a story together. We used our wits, and we exploited some vague, back then the rules were really vague, some vague game rules to get round over through the obstacles that Bruce threw at us, okay? Like a great band, we all had to work together to tell our story and do something that none of us could do alone. We all became storytellers that night. And I was completely hooked, man. I played in that D&D campaign for 10 years and others for longer than that. And here's the pathetic part. My entire professional career has been about trying to recapture that feeling I had in 1978 telling stories with my friends. That's it. There's nothing else going on in my life. It is pathetic. But hey, we're all pathetic. That's why we're here, right? Okay. I'm glad you laughed and didn't get out the pitchforks. Okay, so that mission to recreate that feeling of telling stories with friends, some fellow developers, that's Harvey Smith and Doug Church up on the screen, we call it shared authorship. And if you look past the sort of surface level narrative and the surface level gameplay, that's what all of my games have been about, sharing authorship. Giving up a little bit more control to players and letting players tell their own stories and engaging with players in an equal dialogue. Because here's the deal. Alone among the arts, think about that. Alone among the arts, we can share the responsibilities and joys of creativity with our users. Games don't always engage players this way, but we can. And for me, that means we have a moral obligation to do so. So what that means, what does sharing authorship mean? It means allowing players to choose how to interact with their environment, with the game world, to solve problems the way they want to, not the way a designer planned it. In traditional media, characters are funneled down a path, okay? Their actions are limited, well, they don't have any actions. They're funneled down a path by a director or a writer, an author. Sharing authorship means offering players the opportunity to make choices, to make decisions, to take control of the experience through their actions. And it's also, once you allow them to make choices, it's about showing them the consequences of those choices. If you don't show consequences, if you're just saying, you can go right or left, you're wasting a lot of time and money giving them the choice at all. Show them the consequences. They're in a sandbox where choices have consequences, okay? Choices and consequences are great, but then the game has to respond to those consequences. You let players make choices, you show them the consequences of those choices, the game responds, they get to make more choices. You get to experience as a player what happens if you pull that trigger. And you get to experience something completely different if you don't pull the trigger. That's what games can do. And all of that adds up to something that I think really makes games special. That no two players end up having had the same experience. You watch a movie, the shots are going to unroll in exactly the same order every time that movie plays, whether the viewer does anything or not, right? The words on a page are not going to change their order based on reader input. In games, each session is unique. Each gameplay session is unique. And games are about collaboration with players. They're a process. Gameplay is a process, not an end goal, not an end result. And collaboration is the heart of shared authorship, and shared authorship equals player empowerment, okay? So that's number one. Number two, the second success criterion for me is explained by the simple question, does the player learn something about him or herself as they play? Is there an increase in self-awareness? For me, one of the things that's critical in a game is that players investigate their own real-world personal beliefs about what's right or wrong. So this may not be popular nowadays saying that there aren't good guys and bad guys. People want there to be good guys and bad guys in 2017, I think. 2117. What the hell is it? It's whatever year it is. Man, I've been working really hard on System Shock 3, can I tell you? Wow. I can't remember what year it is. Anyway, in Deus Ex, you had the option of killing enemies or not killing them, but it wasn't about good guys or bad guys. It was about trying to understand the other guy's point of view, and then you get to decide who's right and who's wrong, whose point of view makes sense to you. And the end game wasn't about killing a boss monster. It was about how do you think the world should look. You know, I mean, the Helios AI wants to merge with Denton and rule the world as a benevolent dictator. Morgan Everett offers Denton the chance to bring the Illuminati back to power, and so on and so forth. There were multiple end games, not one of which was about killing something. It was about how do you, as a human being, not as a character, not as a player, how do you as a human being think the world should be? Games can not only confront us with conflicting ideas and conflicting belief systems, but force us to interact on the basis of our own personal opinions with those belief systems. It's not about what these guys think. It's about what you think. It's not about what they would do or should do. It's about what you want to do. Okay. So, I just said that. The third success criterion is that there be one new thing. I don't care if you're working on a My Little Pony game. You can come up with one new thing that no one's ever seen or done. If you're just copying what other people have done, why bother? So, you know, look at mainstream AAA games today, and you see a lot of games that look and feel just like other games. I don't know if you've noticed that. We just got prettier pictures now. And no, I'm not going to name names. It's just get it. You can all imagine. You all know what I'm talking about. Even some of the best-selling games in the world are just retreads, as far as I'm concerned. And that's not good enough. We are too young a medium to assume that games are a solved problem, that we've explored everything that games can and should do. So we have to keep searching for the unique and wonderful. So let me stop for 1 second and just say, I get that the indies, I mean, thank God for indie games. They're doing a lot of things that are stretching the boundaries of what we think of as games. And there's a lot of innovation happening there. And there are some AAA developers pushing the boundaries of the medium. I'm not saying there aren't. I just want more, okay? And it doesn't take much. Let me just talk about my own games again for a second. In Deus Ex, we didn't really even do much that was new. What we did was we took 3 genres and mashed stuff together. You know, that was the big new thing we did. I didn't want to make just a shooter or just an RPG or just a stealth game. I figured if we put those things together, we'd end up with something that felt and played unlike anything anybody'd played. And I'll let you decide if we succeeded. I'm not saying we succeeded in any of this. But that was the #1 sort of gameplay thing. Just take elements of those 3 genres and mash them together. And then take that idea of shared authorship a step further. At that studio, no one was allowed to say the word puzzle. We create problems. And that's true at all of my studios. You're not allowed to say the word puzzle. But problems that can be solved in a variety of ways. That's what Deus Ex was about. And ensure that every player had that unique experience I talked about a minute ago. So that was all Deus Ex really did. And here it is 17 years later, and people still care. It's kind of amazing. So Disney Epic Mickey had its new thing too. And that was our core paint and thinner mechanic. How many people have played Epic Mickey, just out of curiosity? Oh my God. Okay, so half of you hate me, and half, all right. Anyway, so the paint and thinner mechanic, we let players decide when or if they wanted to draw and erase things in the world, basically. We created a dynamic world where you could destroy things to solve problems, which, needless to say, lots of games have done. But we also let you restore them, to bring them back, to save them, which I don't know that any game had done before that. I can't think of one, couldn't think of one then. And the consequences of that choice, paint and thinner, really made a difference in how the game played out. So that's the third thing, one new thing that no one's ever seen or done before. It doesn't take much. You can do it. So the fourth element of my success definition is whether or not I've succeeded in letting players walk in someone else's shoes, experiencing life from the perspective of someone not like themselves. I mean, think about the power of that. That's something that games do that no other medium can do. We can let you experience what it's like to be a kid in ancient Egypt, or well, as you'll see, a vampire. There's a New York Times columnist, David Brooks, who back in 2015 wrote a column called The Big Decisions. And he lamented the lack of empathy in the world and the fact that people can't experience the world from another person's perspective. So at risk of losing everybody in the audience here, I want to read a quote from this guy's column. Okay, it's fascinating. So he said, let's say you had the chance to become a vampire. With one magical bite, you would gain immortality, superhuman strength, and a life of glamorous intensity. Your friends who have undergone the transformation say the experience is incredible. The difficulty of the choice is that you'd have to use your human self and preferences to try to guess whether you'd enjoy having a vampire self and preferences. Becoming a vampire is transformational. You would literally become a different self. How can you possibly know? Can you see where this is going? How can you possibly know what it would feel like to be this different version of you, or whether you would like it? Now, the quote implies, basically comes right and says that it talks about the unknowability of how you'll feel when you have to make a truly consequential life choice. And Brooks has no answer for this. Now, I kind of suspect that Brooks doesn't play games, but I kind of wish he did. Because the fact is, games offer the opportunity to make decisions and try out behaviors in a virtual world that we wouldn't even want them trying in the real world, okay? In a game, you don't just watch someone who's not like you, or read about someone who's not like you. You become someone not like you. Very few of us are like Lara Croft, you know? We become Lara Croft for a little while. Books can't do this, movies can't do it, theater can't do it, painting, dance, opera. Nothing can let you experience for yourself what it's like to be someone other than you, other than games. I'm never going to experience what it's like to be a World War I pilot, except by playing a game. I'm never going to know what it was like, really, to be a knight in a medieval castle, except by playing games. And to use Brooks' example, I'm never going to know what life as a vampire is like unless I play a vampire game. And if we're really trying, and I hope some of you are, you could feel for yourself the sting of racism or religious persecution or gender bias. You could know what it's like to be the last space marine between Earth and alien. Oh, wait, we do that all the time. So to David Brooks, if I could look him in the eye, I'd love to meet the guy someday, partly because he's a great columnist, but also because I want to tell him there's a medium of expression that can let you live as someone else for a little while. And he should give it a try, you know, play some games. He might like it, and he might even learn something about himself. So we can let you walk in someone else's shoes. So here's the fifth aspect of my mission. Do you have a theme or an issue you want to explore? In my opinion, before you start working on a game, unless you're making like a little puzzle game or something, think about what you have something to say, you know? We're as capable of profundity as any medium. You'd think this would be self-evident, but I'm not sure it is if you look at most games today. And actually, when I say make a statement, have something to say, I'm being a little inaccurate. The important thing is that you let players explore a theme. You know, remember all that talk about choice and consequence a little earlier, and about dialogue? So here's where we come back to that. If you really want to make a statement, go make a movie, all right? Get out of my medium, right? Games shouldn't make statements. They can and should ask players to ponder questions. So in a novel or a movie, the author really does make statements. He answers the questions related to a theme or an issue. All you can do as a reader or a viewer is say, I agree, or I disagree. It can get you thinking, and I'm not diminishing that. I love books and movies. But in a game, you can answer those questions for yourself. You can decide for yourself how you feel about the theme and about the issues that are being explored. In Deus Ex, like I said, you get to decide how the world ends up. Every NPC has a worldview, a unique worldview, and you get to decide who's right and who's wrong. The developer asks questions, players answer for themselves. Okay. Let me talk a little bit more about that Q&A. What was Deus Ex really about? It wasn't about shooting stuff or sneaking. That's just the surface level. It was about 4 questions. What happens when you take a guy who believes the world is black and white, good and evil, right and wrong, and throw him into a world that's all shades of gray? What would the world look like if all the conspiracy theories people believe to be true were in fact true? What's the nature of humanity? At what point in a world where human augmentation is ubiquitous do we stop being human and start being something else? And what's the most desirable end state for the world? Okay. How should the world be? Those were what the game was all about for me. And I didn't care whether players knew that. I didn't care whether the team knew that. I doubt anybody on the team knew what the game was about for me. All that mattered was that the game allowed players to answer those questions as they played. Epic Mickey, same thing. I bet Paul Weaver, who was critical to making this game, doesn't even know what this game was about to me. How important are family and friends to you? It was all about you and your brother, you know? You and your brother, Mickey and Oswald. Is it better to be less powerful but have friends who will help you? Or is it better to be more individually powerful but alone in the world? These are like real world questions. You see what I'm getting at? These are not character questions. These are not game questions. These are you questions. These are real world questions. Is it better to do things like local things, like get a cat out of a tree because someone asks you to? Or is it better to say, I've got a world to save. I don't have time to get your cat out of a tree. And what happens when you remain rooted in the past versus being willing to forgive past grievances and move on? I thought players could learn something about forgiveness by playing this game. And what does it mean to be forgotten? How does that make you feel? How does that affect you? So again, players, it's not like any author or any creator wants their theme plastered right up there in front. But characters and developer-generated situations can allow players to explore these questions and answer them for themselves. And anyone who says games can't ask deep questions, even a cartoon mouse can be the vehicle for asking big questions, so I don't want to hear it. You can do this. So those are the things that sum up my mission, okay, and the things that I'm going to measure my success against. So, or, you know, most typically failure, which is why I keep subjecting myself to the hell of development, and you all know what I'm talking about. But why is this stuff important? A mission, success criteria, foundational principles are important because they can help you determine where to work. You're going to be much happier if you work someplace where your personal definitions of success are in alignment with the place you're working. Knowing what success looks like can help you determine who you want to partner with, funding partners, publishing partners, development partners. Try to work with partners who buy into the same things you do. It's going to make that relationship go much, much smoother. A well-thought-out philosophy can provide guidance in project selection. If you know what's important to you, you're not going to waste time concepting stuff that doesn't further your own goals. If you run an indie studio, having a mission can provide, or any studio, really, not an indie studio, it can help you determine who you want to hire. Trust me that it is very hard to turn a shooter freak into a Mickey fan, okay? It is very hard to turn a puzzle game creator into someone who wants to make a Deus Ex. I frankly lost my best level builder and my best writer on Epic Mickey because they couldn't bring themselves to find that Epic Mickey voice, okay? And everybody was better for it. They left to go do things that were more personally fulfilling, and I didn't have to deal with people who didn't want to be making the game I wanted to make. And legacy, it's a crazy word, but when you're as old, as experienced as I am, you will I guarantee that you will come back and think about this. You will be glad you made games that were personally meaningful. You will just be glad. And all of you will inevitably get there. Trust me. I didn't think I would, and I did. And it's good for the medium, right? We are, after 40 years, we're still an infant medium trying to figure out what we're good at, what we're bad at, how we make meaning, you know, how we please people. Your personal goals may be just the thing we need to grow up a little. But having a mission and a philosophy isn't just idle musing, right? There are practical aspects to this that will help you make day-to-day project decisions. It'll help you by, okay, I have this thing I call the creative box. And it'll help you create that creative box. You have heard about this ad infinitum. Sorry, there's one of my ex-students over there. Look, everybody in the game business is creative. Everyone has ideas. Everyone loves to share those ideas. And everyone thinks their ideas are great. And often, they're right. Their ideas are great. But not every idea helps you achieve your success criteria, right? And especially if you're running a studio or you're in charge of a game, you're directing the game's creative. This is critically important. Having a clear mission and well understood success criteria will help you determine which box you're filling and what fits in that box and what doesn't. Out of all the great ideas, yours, the team's, your publishers, because you know they're going to have ideas. Just tell them they're great. Pretend. Doesn't, you know. You cherry pick the ones that fulfill your purpose, your reason for making games in the first place. So given my success criteria and my mission, what do you think the odds are that I'm going to make a sports game anytime soon? It's pretty unlikely. Although if anybody wants to give me money to make a basketball game, I will happily entertain offers. I'm just a basketball freak. Sorry. I say that everywhere in hopes that someone will actually do it someday, but no one's done it yet, damn it. Odds are I'm not going to make a puzzle game, you know. It just does that. Those games or mechanics associated with those games really don't help me accomplish my goals very much. My box contains choice and consequence, learning about yourself, something worth saying, someone's shoes. And here's the deal. If I can't make games that help me fulfill my success criteria, that help me on the road to succeeding in my mission, I will stop making games. That's not an exaggeration. I will literally stop making games. Every game I've worked on has been about those 5 things. And every game I ever work on will be about those 5 things, no matter how it looks on the surface. 5 simple things. And if idea doesn't fit in my box or in your box once you've figured out what it is, it's a bad idea, no matter how cool it is, no matter how great it is. If a decision doesn't fit in the box, it's a bad decision, okay? And that's true no matter who comes up with the idea, whether it's you as creative visionary, or it's a QA person, or it's a publisher. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't fit in the box, it's a bad idea. So what about this? What about constraints? Doesn't that constrain creativity? Well, I would argue that it's okay, right? There's an old saying that all creativity happens within constraints. And I happen to believe that. Now, there are constraints and then there are constraints, right? If you have $1.50 to make a game, you're in a world of trouble. But the key here is that random ideas don't help. Ideas that fit are the kinds of constraints you want. Give teams the freedom to exercise their creativity within well-understood, agreed-upon constraints, understanding what's in that box, and that can lead you to the accomplishment of your success criteria. And here's the most important thing. Your team will, I guarantee, be inspired to new heights of creativity because, like Doctor Who's TARDIS, the box is bigger on the inside than it appears from outside, okay? Those constraints are going to make you more creative, not less creative. Okay, so how do you find your mission? How do you find your why? How do you define that philosophy? Well, the first thing is ruthless self-examination, either proactively or after the fact. So what gets you out of bed? That's a great question to ask. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why were you put on earth? What unites your work? Look back at the stuff you've already done retroactively, and you might actually discover that there's something that already unifies it. Make that explicit. Start thinking about that. And odds are surprisingly high you'll find something. What are the things you must do? What are the things that would drive you out of game development if you didn't get to do them? What are the things you won't compromise on? I mean, well, I won't go there. We can get me drunk and I'll tell you all about that. And finally, and for me maybe the most important advice is this. Find a mentor or several mentors. A real one like face-to-face or a virtual one, someone you can correspond with, ask questions of, learn from. Find people in particular whose work resonates with you, okay? And then try to figure out why. You can even do that on your own. Look at people's work and think about it. Figure out why it works. Don't just say, oh, that was fun. Don't stop there. Think more deeply about work and why it resonates. So for me, I was incredibly lucky. I had mentors in Steve Jackson when I was in tabletop games, Richard Garrett, Paul Neurath, with whom I'm working again now, the guy who created Space Rogue, a game that is unjustly forgotten. Doug Church, Paul Weaver back there again, there he is. Find him, walk up to him and browbeat him into helping you. The lessons I've learned from those guys have informed everything I've done since I worked with them. So find a mentor. And then, how do you get your mission out of your head and into the world with your teams and to others? Well, first and most obvious, your why should be expressed in your work. If it's not expressed in your work, you're not thinking hard enough. But there are other tools for getting the word out. Mission statements are a great way to express a personal vision, a why. If you're interested in my mission statement, which is somewhat like this talk, but more in depth, believe it or not, find my blog. By the way, I'm not promoting my blog. I haven't blogged in years. But one of the earliest, I did a 2-part blog post that was my personal mission. If you want a model, go look at that and say I was full of it and ignore me. Or maybe you'll find a model for your mission statement. It's not hard to find. Constant discussion, privately and publicly. When I started going to GDC, oh man, I started going to GDC a long time ago. But my friends and I used to speak at conferences like this, but we also used to spend all night long. I mean, literally, we would stay up all night, like some of you are at this conference, I'm sure, in someone's hotel room, just talking about games and what made everybody else's games suck and how we were going to destroy Electronic Arts and, you know, what we were going to do to change the world. We used to talk about that stuff. And so privately, we were talking about our personal missions and finding people who agreed with them and finding ways to work together and finding people who disagreed with them and ostracizing them completely. They were wrong. Anyway, but talk privately, talk publicly, and repeat yourself endlessly. Remember when I started, I said some of this is going to sound familiar? Repeat yourself endlessly. It takes a while to beat stuff into people's heads. You guys are stubborn. And someday I'm going to defeat you, okay? And you will believe me someday. So try to find new ways to express your ideas, but repeat them endlessly like I am now. I'm going to stop now, okay. But talk about your success criteria every time you get up in front of an audience at conferences like this one. Every time you talk to the press, find a way. You know, there's an old saying that, it's not a saying exactly, but there's a truism that you don't answer the question you're asked, you answer the question you wish you'd been asked. Do that. Every time you interview a candidate, get your mission out there before you hire someone, not just so you can spread your mission, but also so you can determine if that person believes in your mission and is going to help you. Every time you write a blog post, get your mission out there. Now, you don't have to be explicit, though I usually am, as you can see, but it should be implicit in all of your communications with the outside world. Your mission should be there for everyone to see. Okay, so I am done, but let me recap what I've said today, just to remind you. Document your success criteria at the outset. Know what you want to accomplish and how you'll measure success. Make sure you and your partners are in agreement. Make sure that they understand, communicate. I mean, frankly, if you have to, make them repeat back to you what you said, okay? Make sure their behavior matches the mission. Make sure their behavior matches your understanding and their understanding. There was a thing at Junction Point, my last studio, where I didn't feel like people were living up to the mission. And so a couple of us got lettering, you know, the lettering you can stick to walls, the non-permanent lettering. I got foot-high lettering, and we spelled out "Play style matters." And it was on every single wall. I mean, every wall in the place. Play style matters. That was the 2-word version of my personal mission. That every player's play choices should make a difference. Play style matters. And it was like there was a little revolution. Everybody was really pissed. And you know, we know that. And I just, you know, I was saying to myself, well, why aren't you doing it then? You know? But, you know, make sure everybody understands. And if anybody disagrees, consider whether you want to work with those people, okay? If their goals are radically different from your own, this might not be the best match. And you're going to be miserable, okay? I have turned down incredible job offers because they wouldn't help me achieve my mission and because I didn't think I could succeed at achieving someone else's mission. So try and be true to yourself. And be clear about your creative box. Be able to communicate clearly to your team or to yourself or to your partners what fits in your game and what doesn't. That way they'll be less likely to come to you with ideas that don't fit. If everybody understands, they'll come to you with ideas that fit. And here's the deal. You know, a lot of people think that a designer's job is to tell other people what to do. That is so far from the truth. It's unbelievable. Your job is, like, you're the guy sitting up on top of the stagecoach, okay? And I can't believe I'm using Texas analogies. But anyway, you're the guy sitting up on top of the stagecoach, and you're going from Austin, Texas to Amarillo. And you've got a team of horses that have done that run 8,000 times. They know the way. They know the way. The only time you have to get involved is when they go off the track, off the path. And then you go, no, get back. We're going to Amarillo today. And it's the same thing with the creative box. The only time you have to do anything is when people start getting outside of that box. If you've got that box well defined, they will stay within it. Their creativity will be magnified within that box. You don't care if a pixel is blue or green as long as it's within the box, okay? But if someone gets out of the box, push them back in, okay? Be clear about your creative box. We can talk more about that in the hall. That's a whole big talk. Anyway, and then hold everybody to it. Hold them accountable. Once companies and people and teams agree, they say they get it, hold them to it. And if people forget, remind them what you agreed on. Guide them back where you need them. Then get back out of the way and let them make you look good. Your team is there for you. They will make you look good, I promise. And always think about what Yogi Berra said. Yogi Berra is one of the deep thinkers of all time, okay? Go look him up. His quotes are amazing. And he said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So do everything you can in game development and in life to end up where you want, not someplace else. So start thinking about your success criteria. You don't have to use mine. Mine are not the only ones. Get a start at knowing who you are as a developer. Figure out what's important to you. And I guarantee, this is a rock-solid guarantee, you will do better work and be more professionally fulfilled. And 30 years from now, as you look back on your career, you'll be glad you did this. And I have time for questions if anybody has them. I'm done. Well, there are mics up here if anybody wants to come. Is it okay to take questions? I didn't even ask. Yeah, I tried to get done quick.
Anyway.
That is not working.
Great.
Oh,
Hi.
there you go.
I was wondering, at what point did you first articulate your values in your 34-year career?
It was just
Like at
34.
34, sorry. Was it 5 years in, 10 years in?
It was about when I got to Origin in 1989, so about 6 years, 6 or 7 years in. I came from TSR and tabletop gaming, where it was all about, I mean, everybody kind of knew that it was all about telling stories with friends. And that attitude wasn't really well understood or well articulated or even believed in the digital game space. And I mean, Richard Garrett was like the only person who got it, which is why I went to work at Origin and not other places that I won't name. But I started articulating it then and probably wrote it down for the first time 20 years ago. I've been using the same mission. I mean, if you go to my blog, for real, you will read, it's a 2-part thing back from years and years ago. Just go to the first couple of entries and you'll find it. That has been unchanged except for the company name at the top in about 20 years.
Thank you.
Which either means I don't think deeply enough or I'm stubborn. I'm not sure which. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how your criteria has changed over time? Are there big things that maybe people challenged you that caused you to rethink, or is it more of a strength to like hold firm forever?
Well, I can't speak to whether it's a strength or a weakness, but I am a stubborn guy, and I believe in what I do, and I mean with a passion that burns with the heat of 1,000 suns. And so no, they've been pretty consistent from the start.
Have you faced challenges like to your philosophies?
I've been challenged many times,
Yeah.
and I've always come out on top.
Nice.
Doesn't mean I'm right. It just means I'm stubborn. You know. Yeah.
I was hoping you could elaborate. You mentioned that when you worked on several projects, not everyone knew exactly the internal questions that you were asking in your head about when you were making like Epic Mickey. Like you said like how important is family and such like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you mentioned that everyone should be on board with your statements.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate? Those, at least in my head, kind of conflict with each other.
Yeah. The thing is, you don't have to be coercive. You can be guiding. It kind of gets back to that horrible stagecoach analogy I tried to make earlier. You can kind of guide as opposed to telling people what to do. And again, you don't want your themes to be explicit. So if you're too explicit in the explication of them, even to your team, you're going to end up with people
Beating it over the head.
beating people over the head with it. So you kind of want it to be subtle. And the key thing is when you see people going off the rails, your internal rails, just kind of nudge them back. Just nudge them back. No,
Sure.
How about if we did something different in this story? Or how about if we implemented this system a little bit differently, or offered them a system that did X, Y, or Z? I don't think they're contradictory. I think it's kind
It's a way
of
of going about it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a working method, not anything more or less than that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was wondering how you could, when working with other people, what are there really good ways to keep people in the same space other than like obviously just nudging them back in, but from the start when you're defining those goals,
Mhm.
is there a really, really good way to just start doing that effectively?
Well, at the sort of high level, I think it's important to have a mission statement and share it with everybody so they know what kinds of things you're doing and what's appropriate. And then it sounds kind of nutty, but one of the tools you use for communicating with publishers is also useful for communicating with teams. Write up an executive summary, pitch your team exactly the way you would your publisher or someone you're trying to get funding from. I live and breathe PowerPoint, and presenting to your team so they understand what game you're trying to make is a really valuable tool. Just don't assume that a casual conversation over lunch, though that's important, is enough. I mean, be explicit in your goals, and I think, like I said, a written summary of your goals for that specific project, or even a PowerPoint presentation can go a long way.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So just out of curiosity, where were you at in your life when you first started making a conscious effort to pursue this as a career?
Well, that's okay. The shortest answer I can give to that. I was in grad school. I was working on my doctorate, and figured I'd end up teaching. And I had my classes taken away from me. No, it's not because I wasn't good. It was because I'd been teaching for 13 semesters, and at the University of Texas, you're only allowed 9 semesters of teaching when you're a doctoral candidate. So I got away with murder, and they caught me. But I didn't have any idea how I was going to pay the rent. And out of the blue, I got a call from a guy I'd worked with at the student newspaper, asking if I wanted a job as an assistant editor at Steve Jackson Games. So it all came out of gaming buddies. I'd gamed with this guy. He knew I was an avid gamer. I mean, my life when I was in grad school was movies and games. I mean, that was all I had. There was nothing. And so I was this avid gamer. I was all plugged into the gaming circles in Austin, Texas, and I completely fell into it. I thought it was just a way station in life, and I had no idea it was going to be a career, but I fell in love with it, and people thought I was pretty good at it, and so I kind of stuck with it. So I was actually, wow, how old was I? I was 28 when I started, so I was a lot older than most people, and just fell into it.
Cool, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Hi. So first I'd like to say that your work on choice and identity in games is legendary. So thank you. You've moved the entire medium forward. I'd be really, really
My
interested.
teams have
Sure.
done that.
You were around. You were nearby.
My teams do all I do is nudge them back in and sleep on top of the stagecoach while they're taking me to Amarillo. That's all I do.
I'm curious about your thoughts on choice and specifically subversion. Either your efforts to subvert a player's anticipation of choices, or how do you make players feel like their choices can be subversive?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but if I don't answer it, we'll try again.
Okay.
Okay. The big thing for me is not to offer right or wrong choices, but offer different choices.
Mm-hmm.
Choices that are sort of functionally equivalent but ethically different, you know. And I think the key is the consequence side of things, showing people what happened as a result of their choice, and it might make them sit back and go, huh, wait, maybe I should have done something different, you know, or maybe I'll try something different. Maybe I'll try something different moving forward, you know. So I think it's challenge players ethically with the kinds of choices you're offering them, more than it is just offering them, you know, go right or go left.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
That does. One quick follow-up on that. Do you ever consider, challenging or even deliberately undermining someone's expectation for a choice?
Well, not so much. What you want to do is offer choices that have predictable but not obvious consequences.
Okay.
You don't want players going, if I shoot this thing, it will X. You want players saying, man, I bet if I shoot that thing, something like X will happen. You know, so I think that's how I would approach it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
When you're making the story for your games, do you generally start developing once you have finished with your like established framework, or do you prefer to have the framework of the story like develop as the game itself develops?
Well, I think we're going to talk about narrative later on today, huh?
Right.
So maybe I should give a very short answer. Narrative and play are equally important, and therefore you develop them pretty much in parallel. And come to this afternoon's narrative panel for more. Sorry to be coy.
This might be an oddly specific question. I have a question on one of my exams.
5'8".
Oh,
no,
there you
okay.
go. Yeah. I have a question on one of my exams where I force my students to contemplate the problem of Mickey's ears in 3D. And this was inspired. I've heard, I haven't ever found the source, but I've heard that you've discussed that was a problem you faced in Epic Mickey, trying to figure out how to do that in 3D. And there's a few of them here in the audience. I thought maybe I'd ask if you'd share exactly how you guys approached that problem.
Yeah, I hired a great programmer.
Oh, there you go. That's the answer.
I have no idea how he solved it. I just know he did. He said, hey, I got something for you to look at, and there it was. It was a little miracle.
Oh, that's the truth.
Paul, do you know how that happened? Yeah, you hired a great programmer. Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm training programmers, so that'll work.
Good. Have them solve that problem, and any of them do, give me a call. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot.